So can we also recognise the fact of the thousands of people that have killed themselves out of stress and pressure from these?
Yay!
I'm sorry, this is getting a long way off where we started from. I understand what you're saying, I feel very strongly about it. Okay, so the next question is looking beyond our immediate neighbourhood out into the world again. Against the background of economic struggle for many here at home, how would you fulfil this country's obligations to the world's poorest, both in terms of aid and of fair trade? Now, I notice that all three parties are committed to maintaining the 0.7% of GDP, so I would ask the candidates if you could think particularly in terms of how that money would be spent, and particularly the issue of fair trade. Can I start again with you, please, Ruth George?
Okay, thank you very much. Labour's got a proud record on international development. About a decade ago, I was marching with Make Poverty History, as many of us were, to make sure that we increased aid to poorer countries. And that's part of the reason that we've got mass migration now, because we have such international poverty. So we absolutely support the commitment to spend 0.7% of GDP on foreign aid, because then we can support people in poorer countries to sustain themselves where they live, rather than having to risk their lives and their families travelling over the sea to try and seek a way that they can actually keep their families alive. But we will take robust action. At the moment, there's self-regulation of the international development private contractors. Self-regulation in the private sector doesn't work, I'm afraid. And that's why we will establish new rules and enforce them to ensure that the aid is used to reduce poverty for the many, not to increase profits for a few. And Labour will develop a targeted development agenda based on redistribution, social justice and poverty reduction, partly to improve people's lives, but also particularly to tackle some of the major diseases that are endemic in some of the poorest countries. That involves investment of that foreign aid in our own research laboratories, producing injections for vaccinations for people in poorer countries, supporting jobs in this country, but also eradicating diseases that, as we've seen recently, can affect all of us.
Hi there. As the Chair mentioned in the introduction, I work for a humanitarian aid organisation. My day-to-day job is helping the poorest and most desperate people around the world, as well as here in the UK. I've worked in places like Syria, Iraq, Yemen. So the international development budget is something I am a staunch defender of. In Coalition, we enshrined in law that all future governments must meet the 0.7 commitment, and we wanted to continue. What we would do is we'd invest in eliminating preventable diseases like HIV, TB and malaria. We'd develop a global education strategy to stop 263 million children missing out on education. We'd lead a task force to ensure global companies pay fair taxes in developing countries. We'd build the resilience of disaster-prone countries through healthcare and infrastructure projects. We would seek to protect global spending on programs of vaccination and family planning in the light of President Trump's anti-scientific attacks on them. We'd also, in terms of trade, we'd suspend arms deals to Syria, to Saudi Arabia, whilst it's some investigation that they're being used against civilians in Yemen. This is something I am 100% behind. International development is something that is a proud British charitable tradition, and I hope it continues.
Charles was right, the coalition government actually enshrined the 0.7% in law. All three parties have agreed to keep it. I spent just under 12 months as the Parliament's Private Secretary to the Secretary of State for International Development, Justine Greening, at the time. And I saw firsthand that what we were doing and where it makes a difference. It's put 11 million children in school, more than 60 million people getting access to clean water, better sanitation, improved hygiene. I I wouldn't say I have concerns that it's wisely spent, that would be overegging it, but I do think it needs to be rigorous to make sure the money goes where it's needed. I do know that the International Development Department, I was told last year before, that they had won some awards for their procurement and the use of their money. But I think it's something that as a country, and putting aside party politics for a moment, I think it's something as a country that we could be proud of, that we do actually spend 0.7%. And I wouldn't be against this being looked at every year or every 2 years to check that A, are we sending the right amount, and B, is it going to where it's needed? Because that's the point, it's got to go to where it's needed the most.